Welcome back to our study on leadership, a study entitled A Leader Worth Following. You know, it's one thing to have people that report to you. It's another thing, as it were, if you're a husband, to be charged with being the leader of your family and to have people as a result of that, a wife and children following you. But we don't want to be just someone who's followed because we have a position or a title. We want to be someone who's followed because our lives, who we are and how we live our lives, are magnetic. People want to follow us, not because they have to, because they desire to. They trust us and they feel like we're followable people. We're going to do 20 to 30 minute sessions under this subject of a leader worth following. This is session number 4. Quickly reviewing where we've been. To this point, we've talked about how essential leadership is. It's all about leadership. It's is just everything that really matters in life. Our own self-improvement and growth is about self-leadership. Our capacity to influence the lives of others, whether it's in family, whether it's at work, whether it's in the community, whether it's on a sports team, it really doesn't make any difference. We're all out here charging on and hopefully making a difference in the lives of others. There's a real sense, as I've already said, that all of us, to some degree, title or position or not, we are leading people. I believe anytime we're trying to influence, to change, to alter, to improve, to better the thinking, the behavior, the attitudes, the development and the growth of anyone, including ourselves, we have assumed a role of leadership and a role of influence in a person's life. A few sessions ago, we looked at a definition of leadership as we observed how Mark and Luke and Matthew, specifically Mark chapter 3, verse 14, when Mark said that Jesus appointed the 12, those apostles, to be with him, and he sent them out to preach. Those 3 key elements that are there in providing a definition for leadership. You may remember the visual that I gave to you a session or two ago that gives us a picture of this definition of leadership, where you have a leader, a person, influences people, the followers, to achieve a purpose or to get results in their lives. So you put all that together, and a leader is a person who influences people to achieve some purpose. It really is that simple. Leadership is first about relationships. Jesus called them to be with him. And then it's about getting results. He sent them out to preach. But a key question is, how do you develop this person into a worth-following individual? And we looked at my life verse on leadership, Psalm 78:72, where Asaph writes of David, and David shepherded them with integrity of heart. With skillful hands, he led them. He led them. What gave David the right to lead them? First, as it were, as a shepherd, and then as the king. Well, I believe there are 3 essential components that are just must be present in order to become a leader of credibility and one who is worth following. First is authentic character. David had integrity of heart. Secondly, exceptional competence. Knows what to do, how to do it, and gets it done. That's where it talks about with skillful hands. And then third, it says he shepherded them. David built relationships, and it was out of those relationships he accomplished purposes and achieved objectives. And that's what I call the last C, the relational connection. So you got character, you got competency, and you got connection. Kind of what I've labeled my 3C model. In this session, we're going to look specifically at this first component, and it is the key. It's the non-negotiable. It's the fundamental, foundational, core key of becoming a leader that's worth following, and that is being a person of authentic character. Leaders worth following are always character-driven. Now, you and I live in a world, and I've seen some of this also in the church world as well, that leadership is driven more by intellect, or perhaps by talent, or by charisma, or by personality. And all of those are important aspects of being a leader worth following. but they really are pale into comparison when it comes to being a character-driven leader. That's the most important thing about a person that's worth following, is that their core, who they are, makes them want you to follow them. Now, let me ask you a question. I've asked this question many, many times in leadership seminars. Is character essential for leadership to happen? Now think about that for a minute. Think about great leaders from history, from the military realm, from the political realm. And think about that basic definition of leadership is a person, influencing others to achieve or accomplish some purpose or result. So is character essential for leadership? The answer to that's no. But it is essential for leadership if that leader desires to be a person worth following. Hitler was a leader. Saddam Hussein was a leader in the basic definition of leadership. But character? Missing in their lives and the lives of many others. And for you and me, especially those of us who claim to have a relationship with Christ, there is nothing more important than our character being authentic and being godly. In this session, I'm going to address 3 questions related to the character of a leader. And then in the next session, I'm going to do 3 more questions that address the character of a leader. Now, character is important. I heard about 2 old ladies that were making their way through a British cemetery. And as they made their way through the British cemetery, they came upon a headstone. And on the headstone were these words, "Here lies John Smith, an honest man and a politician." The lady read that, and then her friend said to her, "Can you believe that? They buried 2 men in the same grave." In the political world in which you and I live, it really is very difficult to find men and women that character is what drives their lives. I heard about a man that was filling out a job application. And as he made his way through the application, he was asked, "Have you ever been arrested?" And he said, "No." And then there was a follow-up question. He said, "Why?" And he wrote in these words, "I guess I never got caught." Well, that's a lack of character. We need to understand what character is and how important it is in our lives. So here's question number 1. What is character? What is character? I mean, something so significant, something so important to who we are, and yet it's something that we rarely talk about or much less think about in terms of our own character. What is it? It really can be to some hard to define. Here's what I know about character. When we're in the presence of it, when we're around it, we know it, we sense it, we feel it. The Bible doesn't have a lot to say specifically about the word character. There's not a lot there. In the Old Testament, the word character is not even mentioned. Probably the closest thing to it is the word integrity, like the one in Psalm 78, 72, and David shepherded them with integrity of heart. That word integrity is found 25 times in the Old Testament. And the transliteration into English is the word tov. And a person of character, as it were in the Old Testament, the word tov means a force or an influence. Isn't that interesting? Because that's exactly what leadership is all about. When someone has character, they're a force. They have influence. They're catchy. They're contagious, as we talked about in the definition of influence. When you come to the New Testament, character really is only mentioned twice, and both of those are in Romans chapter 5, verses 3 and 4 by the Apostle Paul. Let me read those verses. Paul writes, "And we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character produces hope." The word character there, the Greek translation, alliteration of that into English carries with it the idea of etching or forming or engraving something. How does that define character? It does it in this way. Every time we choose an attitude, every time we make a decision about a course of action, it's like we're etching, forming, engraving a groove. And as we make those decisions, good, bad, neutral decisions, every time we do that, we're etching, and we're etching and framing the character that we choose to have in our lives. Let me give you my working definition of character that I thought about over a number of years and I've used for a long time. Here is my definition of character, and I hope it helps you. Character is the sum total of a person's qualities. Those qualities could be intellectual, they could be emotional, they could be psychological, they could be spiritual. It's all of those aggregated together. Character is the sum total of a person's unique and distinct qualities. Good and bad. Good and bad. That together, they reflect who we are and affect what we do. Our core and our attitudes and our actions. And here's the key at the end, regardless of circumstances. Core is consistent. Core is consistent. Character is consistent, regardless of circumstances. As I mentioned a time or two, Andy Stanley is one of my spiritual heroes, and he wrote a book on character a number of years ago. And I'd like to mention his definition because I think it's very insightful. Andy Stanley says, character is the will to do what is right, as defined by God, regardless of personal cost. It's the choice to do what's right, but it's God's right. It's God's right, regardless of personal cost. I love that definition for two reasons. Number one, it says that there is a standard. It's not what I decide, it's what God has decided is right. And number two, there is probably going to be a cost to pay. There's a price, especially in this world, to living a life of authentic, godly character. So I hope it helps you understand what character is. I hope you'll think about your definition of character as well. The second question that I want to ask and answer is, why is character important? Why is character important? It's such a critical part of who we are. It's such a critical part of what we do in our lives. And character, probably first and foremost, is important because character is what builds trust. And trust is what builds relationships. The writer of Proverbs also says that a character is what enables us to have a clean conscience. It enables us to sleep at night. In Psalm, I love Psalm 15, where David asks, who can ascend to the hill of the Most High? Who can come into a close and intimate relationship with God? And David describes the marks, the attributes, the attitudes, the activities of a person who has the character. And he says that character is what enables him to come into a deeper relationship with God. The more our character becomes like Christ, then the deeper and the closer do we become in our communion, in our walk, in our journey with Christ. And that's a great upside in terms of the importance of character. But I love the last phrase in Psalm 15, in the last part of verse 5, where David writes, he who does these things will never be shaken. Will never be shaken. I think one of the greatest outcomes of character, and it probably makes a connect to the Romans 5, 3, and 4, where it talks about that suffering develops perseverance, and perseverance develops character, and character develops hope. And that's this. When you and I are persons of character, especially godly character, it does something in us to give us the perseverance and the stamina to make it through some of the really difficult times of life. It gives us the ability to stand with God and for God when life gets hard and unfair. It enables us to have the stamina needed so we'll not be shaken because the core in our lives is solid. So question one, what is character? It's who you are. It's your and my very core in our being. It's the very essence and substance of who we are and of what we do and why we do what we do in our lives. Proverbs 22:1 says that that a person with a good name is better to be desired than gold. And I think the reference there that he's talking about is that good name is a person of character. See, character is so much more important than reputation. Character is really who you are. Reputation is what everybody's seeing or thinking about you. And that should be based on a character that's fundamentally becoming more and more like Christ. I like John Marley. He had a great quote. No man can climb beyond the limitations of his own character. I mean, it really determines who we are and what we do. Character is important. And for those who desire to be leaders worth following, it is the critical core component that must be present in our experience. So what is character? Why is character important? And then our last question for this session is this. What's the key quality? What's the key ingredient of character? Character is made up of a lot of behaviors and attitudes. But I believe there's one that is the essential. It's non-negotiable. And that is the attitude and the attribute of integrity. Integrity. I wish I had time to take you to a handful of Psalms, a handful of Proverbs where integrity is specifically mentioned. That word when a person is a force or an influence with their lives and affecting the lives of others. But integrity, probably where we're most familiar with integrity is back when we were taking mathematics. The word integrity can come from the mathematical world, and we get the mathematical term integer from it. Now, I don't know if you'll remember, it may have been a while for some of you, but an integer is a whole number. It's not a fraction, it's not a partial, it is a whole, it's an entire number. What does it mean when a person is a person of integrity? It means that they're whole. They're not fractionalized, they're not divided, they're not compartmentalized. They are together. There is a consistency. There's no veneer. There's a consistency in who they are and what they do. What they say, they do. What they do, they say. There is an integration of both words and deeds in that person's life. Integrity is the key component to being a person of character. As I end the session today, I want to share with you two powerful quotes about integrity. One is from Andy Stanley, and one is from the great saint of God, Billy Graham. I want you to listen to these quotes, and then I'll have a closing story for you. Billy Graham wrote these words, "Integrity is the glue that holds our way of life together. We must constantly strive to keep our integrity intact. When wealth is lost, nothing is lost. When health is lost, something is lost. When character is lost, all is lost." Isn't that profound? Isn't that profound? As important as wealth and health are, they're not near as important as being a person of character. And then one more from Andy Stanley. Listen to his words. "Integrity is not necessary if your aspirations as a leader end with simply persuading people to follow you. But if at the end of the day your intent is for those who follow you to respect you, integrity is a must. Your accomplishments as a leader will make your name known. Your character will determine what people associate with your name." Listen, gang, there is nothing more important than being authentic and godly in your character. It is the core fundamental principle. We get so concerned about having this and being able to do that. I really believe that if you and I got more concerned and more committed to our character being authentic and godly, if we would choose to be the right person in our core and our character, I got to believe having these things and finding those things and doing those things would eventually take care of themselves. Well, that's three questions. When we get together next time in our next session, we'll look at 3 more questions about being a leader that's worth following because you're a man or woman of authentic character. I'll see you next time.